Welcome to the 30-Day Redemption, June 29th. 29th day into our journey. It has been fantastic. And as we draw close to the close of this reboot of the 30-Day Redemption, we wanted to go into a topic of feeding the spirit and sources of food for the mind. This is going to be a discussion with four people. And as we go through, they will have their various perspectives on how they feed their mind and what results they have. Our disclaimer is the opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the presenter. They do not purport to reflect the opinions or views of the 30-Day Redemption or its members, officers, staff, partners, or advertisers. When we slow down, quiet the mind, and allow ourselves to feel hungry for something that we do not understand, we are dipped into the abundant well of spiritual longing. How do I feed my mind? Now, there's a lot of talk about healthy foods, GMO versus organic. But what about our mind? Because obviously, with our bodies, if we put things inside that are harmful or that are not nutritious, or even if our bodies cannot absorb, I believe we covered that in the previous discussion, that if your body cannot absorb nutrition, then it will be almost as if you have a food desert, not because there's no food, but because you cannot digest or absorb the nutrients. So the same thing happens for our mind. Is your mind able to learn? Are you teachable? Are you in a position to receive the information? Are you listening or are you just hearing? So the feeding part can be the output, of course, but then there's also the input where you have to be able to receive the information to benefit yourself. So how do I feed my mind? Well, I'll take you on my personal journey. I'm Kashab, and I'll take you on my personal journey. And these two resources, uh, the scriptures, the Holy Bible, and the Apocrypha, has totally transformed my mind and totally transformed my person. I don't know if that's applicable for everyone else, but for me, um, beginning in 1992 until now, let's even say 91 until now, these two resources has given me a great foundation, um, a great comfort, and a source of wisdom, history, and even inspiration for things like 30-Day Redemption. So the irony is that these resources have been part of the foundation to allow the manifestations of things like 30-Day Redemption or any other project or any other thing in my life. So just as a foundation, I would study, read. I don't know how many times I've been over and over and read over the scriptures, but literally I'm getting ready to start another one. And it's exciting because life and life experiences actually help now when you go back in to make certain things stand out even more. So it's a whole new adventure to go back in and to read, but also having a good foundation now, I can go into other books. And I have, I've read other books and you get a chance to cross reference. But the whole idea is being in a space of thought and being in a space of constantly feeding the mind and then allowing the mind to dissect the information and to inspire. So study and read the scriptures, the Bible, the Apocrypha, which means hidden. That 1611 image that we saw on the previous slide has the Apocrypha in it. And the Apocrypha is the history between, let's say, the Old Testament and the New Testament. There's history in there and fascinating information that actually is relevant today. Um, Also, as we covered in a previous discussion, we talked about patterns, and the scriptures help me with patterns. Helps me to understand the formulas. People operate according to certain formulas, and the scriptures tell you about these particular types of spirit. You can find that in Proverbs. You can find that in a book called Wisdom of Solomon. Another book called Ecclesiasticus. Those of you who are friends of mine on Facebook, I'm always posting from these various sources because it literally has inspired me in ways untold. And the wisdom in the pages help you to understand the patterns and kind of know what's next as far as human behavior. Then there's one called the Audio Bible. Highly recommend. If anyone's interested in that, send me a message and I'll send you a link. By a man called Scorby, Alexander Scorby. And by far, he is one of the best audio Bible readers. Why? Because sometimes you can't sit down and read and you still want to gather the information. For those of you who are curious in hearing how he sounds, just go to YouTube, type in Alexander Scorby, Scorby, and pick one of his audios, and he does such a fantastic job. So that's a source. And sometimes I would catch it 3 in the morning, 5 in the morning. If you're ever doing an early morning drive when it's quiet, it's like you're literally traveling through whatever he's reading. So it's an excellent resource to get the information in. My point is, get the information in the mind and then allow the mind and your experiences to give you inspiration or whatever the next steps are. I've recently started listening to audiobooks, maybe over the last 2-3 years, and awesome, awesome resource for me to get the information in because I'm always moving around, always doing something, and that's the way to get it in. The funny thing about audiobooks, which is interesting, is that whatever activity that I'm doing has to be something mechanical, because if I have to do something where I have to write, I can't listen to the audiobook because I want to hear every word. So audiobooks.com, they have they used to have, I don't know if they still have it, when you sign up they give you one free book. When I signed up, I listened to a book called The Power of Full Engagement. Great book. So you guys could pick whatever book you want, but that was a really good one. Audible, same thing. You set up an account, you could listen to the books. If you don't want to pay, there is YouTube. You type in the name of the book and then type audiobook, and you probably will find it. I've listened to some cool books. And then there's LibriVox, where regular people would read stories, and they have a whole archive of books you can listen to. So those are some other ways that I get information in. Then there's online PDF books. Internet Archive, they have all kinds of books. Digital, if you have an iPad or if you have a computer. I don't really recommend reading from your phone, unless you have a big enough phone. My phone is not that big, so the older you get, the more blurry. But Internet Archives has some great books, and what I do is I would download it and then store it in one of those Dropbox or box or flash drive, so you can have it and you can look at it later. But great for research. Older books, great resource. Same as with Google Books. You can go in, download the Google Books app, pull up some books. I mean, the thing about knowledge and books is that it doesn't have to be a recent book to give you good knowledge. And I've noticed some of the older authors, the further back, they just seem to be more intellectual. They seem to be more educated. The words that they use really will help to expand your vocabulary. So Google Books is another great source for PDF files, aka meaning it looks just like the book, only thing is in digital format. Another resource for me to feed the mind or feed the brain is having conversations with enlightened studied, purposeful, and progressive people. Um, I try to avoid conversations that are just nothing, meaningless, frivolous. Although I like to have fun as well. I'm a silly person when I get ready, so I don't mind having fun. But if your conversation is too heavy, too if it's just not stimulating, I gotta go because it's not progressive. Okay, so uh, progressive people bring pieces of the puzzle that you may not have, or even having a conversation with someone who has good feedback may inspire. Um, 30 Day Redemption, again, one of those conversations that inspired something that benefited other people. Um, and being able to talk with people, especially well read people, some of the people that will come on, well read, and they'll bring a piece of the puzzle, and through that dialogue spark another thought that you may have had, and then you kind of have this tennis of conversation, throwing things back and forth, and it has inspired quotes, it has inspired projects, it has inspired businesses, it has inspired friendships. So um connections, money, all of these things from having conversations with enlightened, studied, purposeful, and progressive people. Another good way to feed the brain for me is instrumental music. Um, Music without lyrics sometimes is just good because I can do other things while listening to music. Piano being one of my favorite instruments, I could listen to that. It's kind of in the background. Um, Even the sax, but listening to instrumental music helps me to be able to keep the mind calm while information is going in. I might be reading or I might be working. But if you're listening to songs with lyrics, to me, while trying to do other things, it's a bit of a distraction. But also, what I do like about songs with lyrics is being able to dissect or to feel the thought of the writer, especially um, if it's a relatable tune. There's a lot of wisdom in music, especially if you listen to various eras. You get to see through the era that they're in, kind of what the vibe of the people is, and then you also get to see, you know what, other people went through the same thing just by the lyrics. So very powerful as far as lyrical music, but for me the preference is instrumental, because I like to do more than one thing at a time. And then another way of feeding the brain, fasting. Like right now, we're on a fast, and there's something about fasting that gives you a sense of clarity. As Shalimar brought out the other day when we had our conversation about words, the ability for fasting to quiet the mind, to be able to pick up better on information, cannot be it cannot be overlooked. So fasting is a good way for me to be able to get clarity, but also whatever information, it helps to make the information have a stronger impact because the mind is clear. If you fast for more than one day, you will notice your ability to push out information or to receive information. And then as soon as you start eating, what do you want to do? Go to sleep. So fasting is good for me as far as a strategy in helping me to feed the brain because the brain can rest and then it can take in information with greater clarity. Secondly, prayer, in various intervals throughout the day, is a good way for the brain to be reconnected. As we seen when we did the words breakdown, how prayer is a way of connecting you with the creator. And that's very important to me because, again, it's a source of inspiration. So it's not coming from a book, it's not coming from a PDF, it's not coming from a conversation, it is coming from the spirit and getting certain clarity and inspiration that way. And plans cannot be overlooked for me. And then the last is silence. Try a day where you just really not talking. once a week. If you have a, maybe the next fast we will do a fasting of talking, and just notice the peace of mind that you have, the energy that you have by just simply not speaking. So those are some of the things that I do to feed the brain, um, and also to feed my spirit. So next up, we have Rafaela. She's going to talk about some of the things that she does to feed the brain, and then we have two other guests that will also give their information. So, Rafaela, are you available?
I am. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for that list. I have to add some things to mine.
Hey, hey, hey! Don't steal my stuff. All right, go
So
ahead.
for me, I studied the Bible. I've been studying the Bible for a few years now. Um, I do it first thing in the morning. Sometimes, when I'm laying in bed before I even get up to start my day. And I normally do it through my app, my Bible app. It could be different at each day. I will either might look up the scripture for the day, or something might come into my spirit, or a certain word that might have me look up, and I'll have that in mind. But I'll do that first thing in the morning, when I wake up. So, and what that does for me is just gives me a space of, this is what I need to be focusing on for the day, throughout my day. So, study the Bible. And sometimes I'll look up the scriptures again towards the afternoon. So it depends on what kind of day I'm having. But sometimes I'll look up things several times a day in the Bible. But first thing in the morning, what I do is look at the word. Um, the second thing that I also do is I read a lot of books on healing and growth. Now, when I say healing, I'm talking about um, healing of the body, things that you can eat to heal the body, foods. I like to read about herbs and medicine. So I read a lot of information on that feeds my spirit. And I also like to read a lot of books on growth. And what that looks like for me is, it could be books on business, things that will make me a better entrepreneur, information about um, um, life lessons. Like, one of the books that I love, that I used to read it once a year, like reread it once a year, was The Alchemist, by Paulo Coelho. He's a Brazilian author. I don't know if anybody knows that book, but if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend. But I'll read books that has to do with, that will give you life lessons, like books like The Four Agreements, by Miguel Ruiz, and books that will teach you about life. So those are the most books that I like to read. Um, and then, of course, uplifting music and vibrational sound. So music has a huge impact in my life, coming from a family of musicians, 24 of them. Um, and, one thing that I noticed about music, and it's interesting that we did a theme on music the other day. Um, music has an impact, at least for me, it puts me in a certain mood. So if I'm listening to a song that is sad, or, this happened, or it just immediately puts me in a mood that I don't like. So I usually try to really be mindful of the music that I'm listening to. Um, I want it to feel good. I want it to make me happy, or put me in the mood of dancing. So, and most of the time, some of the music that I listen to puts me in the mood of dancing. So I usually like to listen to uplifting music. And one of the things that I really like to do is also listen to vibrational sounds. So I go on YouTube and look up healing sounds, or sounds that help with certain chakras, or sounds that helps me focus. If I'm working on something that I need to focus, and no distractions, I will put that song, music that helps me with, be focused. So anything that helps me balance. And I also look for sounds that are, that helps with certain parts of your body, So I normally listen to those type of music, throughout the day. I pray throughout the day. Sometimes might not be prayer that I'm actually speaking out loud, but it could be prayer that I'm just, having conversation with the Most High in my mind through meditation. But I also sometimes takes time to meditate. And when I say meditate, it's not I just sit there and allow things just to flow. I do what's called intentional meditation. If there's something in my mind, I go into meditation with that intent. And that could be something that I want to discover, or maybe something that I want to accomplish. And another thing that I do is on a daily basis is I set an intent for the day. Even though the day might not go as I wanted it to go, but there's an intent there. And so if something gets out of whack, I remember what my intent was. So I do the intentional meditation. So where I would, sit, sometimes I'll go outside if it's not raining, and I will, set an intent of what it is that I want and how I want to accomplish things. Sometimes before I even begin to work what it is I need to work on, I visualize what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. So I do that a few times a day. Another thing that I like to do, and I know some of you, if you were with me during the body segment, the EFT tapping, we did a modality of EFT tapping, which is to bring down anxiety. But I also use EFT tapping to clear the subconscious mind. So sometimes I'll just do the tapping quietly. And then what it does something will show up that needs to, clear the subconscious mind. So I do that. Another thing that I love to do is create art through photos. So I like to take a bunch of different photos and create one image out of it. And I love to do that. That brings me in a space of calm. And it's one of the things that feeds me. Sometimes when I'm like, okay, I can't, like if I'm stuck, if I'm working on something and I just can't figure it out, I just stop everything and I just go create an art. So that puts me in a different space. So that feeds my spirit as well. Love watching YouTube videos on graphics. I always feel like I can learn something new or something different that I can implement in my work. So I love watching YouTube videos on graphics. I also love to watch commercials on YouTube. It gives me, it puts me in a creative space. So I love to watch graphics and also video commercials on YouTube. And one of the things that I love to do, I love to do is read food photography blogs. Not only do I love to read the recipes, how they came up with it. I look at their photos, I study the lighting, and normally I follow them on Instagram, and I save their recipes. So I love reading food photography blogs, because, I'm a food photographer, but just looking at their techniques and learning about the ways they kind of do things, I really, really love. One of my favorite food bloggers is, she's an Asian American woman, and her blog is called I Am a Food Blog. So if you ever have a chance, go look at her stuff. She's really cool. So these are some of the things that I like to do, that feeds my spirit pretty much on a daily basis. So that's pretty much it.
Excellent. I have a question in regards to the amount of things that you do to feed the mind. Do you ever get to a point where your mind is saying, okay, enough, take a break? Or is it more like a fish in water type of thing where you just enjoy it and it feels like normal and it's better in the content feeding than outside of it?
For me, it's normal. Like sometimes if I miss a few things, I feel like, gosh, I didn't do this today. And so for me, it's norm. It's become norm. It's been part of me. And when I don't do it, I'm a little bit like, oh, I didn't meditate today intentionally, or, gosh, I'm not listening to whatever music. So for me, it feeds me. Like for me, is not like for me, for example, the food blogs. I normally read that at the end of the day before I go to bed. Like, grab my phone, I'm just going through them. And so for me, no, for me, it's like, it's like a fish in the water. I need that.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for that. I think I'll steal some of your pointers as well. All right, moving on, we have Alexandra. Alexandra is going to take us on her journey of kind of how she feeds her mind, and we're going to listen in. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Perfect. All right, so let's see if we can steal some of your mind feeding things.
Well, I'm gonna have to steal some from some of you guys because I left out a lot of stuff on here.
Awesome. Okay, so what you
Okay,
got?
so on here I put down colleagues. I'm going back to my days when I was a teacher in the classroom, and we fed off of each other a lot because we had to do, lessons. We had to collaborate on projects. So during the day, our brain was always going, but it was more related to like school stuff. Also, within the school, we would always have trainings, and not necessarily trainings on how to teach the children a certain skill, but trainings more on us, on how to deal with issues that were going on in the classroom, things to, build our capability of doing better with the children. Um, the things that I put on here are a lot of towards my interest. I'm an avid gardener. I love to garden. So when I wake up in the morning, that is my go-to place, is to go out and be in the garden and take care of the plants, as well. It is my space to pray and to study as well. Another thing that I really enjoy doing is learning about safety, preparedness. And I came across FEMA a couple of years ago and discovered that they offer a plethora of classes for free. So being involved in that has been very meaningful because I take that information and I can share it with others. So that fills my spirit because I know I'm doing something for someone else and I'm going to be able to pass this information on. So I put the website address on there if anyone else is interested. Um, Another way that I've been feeding my spirit in regards to my purpose in being of service to my community is getting involved with my local government, finding out what classes they have, trainings, workshops. They offer a lot of different things, and free to the point where you can also get college credit. So being involved in that, I mean, when you're involved in something that you like, it's very freeing. You get very involved, and it's good. I put on here, I'm sorry, I'm trying to look at the screen, but also they have different programs that you can learn a trade. There is a gentleman that put on a community program where you can learn how to do carpentry. You know, focusing your mind on things that you can do with your hands is uplifts the spirit because then you're going to take that and help someone else. With that said, I'm very hands-on. Um, just like when I'm doing my research and I'm reading, and I like to make and build things. When it comes to gardening, building garden boxes, things like that is very freeing and comfortable space to be in. I put on here also city colleges. You can tell I'm very studious as well because I have a lot of school stuff on it. City colleges offer a lot of continuing education courses. Like how Rafaela was saying, she likes to take photographs. If you want to learn how to take, photos, you can join a class and do that. I mean, there's ways of finding services to feed your interests. It's out there. And sometimes you don't have to pay for them. And sometimes you can get, financial assistance, but it's there. Another thing I like to do is when I get into something that intrigues me, if I am doing a biblical study and there's a word that might stand out to me, I go out and I like to go on Google and do research on it. Another thing that I started to do is like when I find a research and I'm interested in what this author is saying, I'll look at his references and see where he got his information, and that will lead you down a rabbit hole, because you'll start finding, you know, where did he get his info from? Where did that person get it from? And it opens up, you know, a plethora of information. And something that Kashab said earlier, you know, vocabulary. Vocabulary is very important in understanding, you know, word meanings, and knowing that it can mean more than one thing, not only for you, but also for the children. So I forgot what I was going to say, but the references, using the references and studying them is also really good. I'm kind of like a research buff. So in between gardening, in between painting, these are the things that feed my spirit. Painting, if I get started on painting, it can last me like 3 days. I'm so focused that nothing else. I'll stop, you know, probably to eat and feed the children, but I'll get lost in that. People is a very good resource of information. I think Kashab has said earlier, you know, good content from good people feeds your spirit and also leads you to more information. Sometimes a word is said and, you know, the light bulb goes off and you're making a connection about something that you saw, you read, or you thought, and that opens up to more discovery and more research. I'll go to art. I really didn't write anything on there, but the art is very, that feeds my spirit tremendously. And it's opened up, you know, doors that I've never opened up before to discover, you know, who I am, you know, where do these thoughts come from, you know, and that leads you down a line of more research. So all of this is feeding me, and I love it because every day I'm discovering something new.
Excellent. And it sounds like good exercise. I mean, you know, the other cool thing too is, you know, you may do your research and then you may speak to someone and then it takes the research even further. Just like you said, one word, you can say one word and boom, it might be that one word to unlock whatever it is that you're looking to unlock. So I commend you for being an avid researcher. You know, I've benefited from some of your research, and hopefully you benefited from some of my words. And you know that creates that purposeful circle of people to communicate with. So great job. All right.
Thank you.
Are you done, or did you have anything else to add?
I'm just sitting here thinking. I think I've added. I think I talked about more of, you know, we've talked about the spiritual aspect, but like the tangible aspects of resources and things that you have at your fingertip, you know, for free, is what I added here. And you know, and most of all, like is people.
Hmm.
People, the good content that people provide, and be able to communicate with these people effectively so that you can have that dialogue to be able to, you know, hear that information that's needed.
You know, one thing that I thought was pretty fascinating is when you, especially using like the Internet Archive sort resource, is getting to a point where, and I got to get Randolph in right away, but getting to a point where you start finding books in other languages, and you're like, man, wish I could speak Spanish, because this is a whole book of history, and you want to be able to tap in, you know, and you don't know the language. So that network also helps to be able to unlock information that's in other languages that can take it to another level. So, all right, Alex, thank you. Let's move on.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Randolph, are you
Hey,
available? All right.
yes, I'm available. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go. Just tell me when you want me to go to the next slides, and I will do so as you go through your presentation.
Okay, go to the next one.
Okay.
And then, okay, so I'm gonna discuss a little bit more about learning through listening, and just the idea of that and how it came about for me. You know, and of course, you know, they have this thing about constantly hearing that we have a tradition, or Africans, of storytelling and learning through storytelling. But more particularly, I just want to go into a little bit more from my background and then move forward with it. Can you go to the next slide? Okay. Um, okay. So of course, you know that I was a teacher. Or I was in my whole thing is about just education. After spending about 20 years in the college, well, I'd say 15 years in college. After getting one degree to the next, I just never felt like I learned anything because the whole process was. It just didn't feel like I was educated. We went to a research school in Albany. I first finished like a master's in education, and I went back and got another MBA, and then I continued just learning, learning, learning. And the reason is throughout the whole period, I had a difficulty reading. I didn't understand why my reading was difficult until I became a teacher. And the reason it was is that when coming from the Caribbeans, I never learned phonics. And when I was teaching these kids with mild intellectual disability, I realized that they didn't know the pronunciation of words, and the pronunciation in the Caribbeans is a bit different. And then coming in and having the accent was kind of shying away from reading out loud. So that was my issue. So in school, I majored in this area of called curriculum development and instructional technology, CDIT. But I focused, in order to get through college, I had to either read the summary of most of the books or go to the library and try to find some kind of audio or some way of her listening to the materials. And I would just go to the state libraries in the nighttime and try to find all the books that was made for blind people, audio books, and just like devour them. But they didn't, at the time, we didn't have internet access like we do now, and they didn't have audio books and books online. One of the things that stood out to me was that I noticed that all the people that was considered smart or intelligent or brilliant, like they would say, I read 140 books, so they could reference all these names. I mentioned in this example the people that were really smart, read a lot, Oprah, Malcolm X. But one time I seen Bill Gates, he would carry around about 40 books. And I would write down whatever books he read, and I would just go and try to find it online and see if I could and listen to it. I noticed that there's like a correlation between being well read and being smart. And I guess for me, that was like one of my major motivation. You would also see that in these movies. That's why I listed them. Like in the movie The Matrix, you'll have somebody showing that he downloaded information and his eyes went off, and all of a sudden he learned. Like, or an old movie like Lawnmower Man or Limitless. These guys, they started reading, and as soon as they read, you'll see that they'll like clean up themselves. They'll start dressing differently, fixing their hair, almost like the enlightenment or the information went into their body and kind of changed how they carried themselves, how they dressed, things like that. Um, so one of my advantages is my wife majored in started majoring in library science, and she was working in the library system. So I would pick her up. She worked in about 5 or 6 different libraries. So I would go there and I would just borrow all of their small held audio books, but they were older books that, were popular and stuff like that. So I told my wife a few days ago, I said, I'm going to talk about these online books. He says, I read about 5 books this week, or listened to 5 audio books this week, in the last 2 weeks. And she, like one of the exciting things in my house was, did you know that the new Jim Crow got released like a few days ago, like the audio book? So I'm like, what? I got to get to that. Like that's the kind of discussions we have. But more, if I go to the next slide, I'll just kind of tell you a little bit more the impact of like how these. Okay, so of course, as a person that's in the curriculum development field, which I studied, I learned about the different learning styles. And I think most people are a combination of some. But for me, I focus more on the auditory learning, just like listening a lot. With listening, you can spend 3, 4 hours in a book learning how to be quiet and just listening to somebody. That's training in itself, And so it kind of it makes me learn how to listen, like how to hear people and how to connect information. And it's a there's a you even if that's not your strong area, learning how to listen is also an area that can be advanced, or listening to the spoken word. And I realized that most people, like comedians, artists, all they do is just tell stories. That's pretty much the nature of it. It's people talking. So I said that ended up being like what led it to be more attractive. But let me go to the next slide for me. So what I did, and I wanted to share this with you guys as a resource, that I found um, how to get all of those audiobooks that people are paying $40, $50 for, $30 on Amazon for free. And that's just from the, so you down, and of course I mentioned to Kishar that you download this app called Overdrive, and Overdrive allows you to take your library card from whatever library system. Of course, this library is free, especially in New York City. What these people do is they order books based on demands of the people. So in New York, you would get access to all of the like real high end quality books that you wouldn't normally, that you would see on Amazon just got released. It might be a waiting list, but you can get books that, you know, I would have about 15 books out at a time, and I would just have them just switching from one book to the next. But on Overdrive, I was able to enter the New York City library card, which is free for anybody in New York State. And I can enter the upstate
Make sure that we hear
New
everything.
York
Okay,
library.
Randolph had
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. We just want to make sure we get everything. Did you get to the
Okay.
Hoopla area? Just make sure you
No,
have
I
a great
didn't.
signal. Okay. All right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We lost you
So
for a second. Go ahead.
yeah, so with Overdrive, you can add all of the library cards within New York State or upstate New York or wherever you are. So the good thing about having that library system is you get the latest and just released book that just came out. Not only audio, you can get movies and things like that. And it confuses me that when people have all this access to this information, why would they choose to just listen to music and watch movies when you have all these books that you could never get before? So Hoopla is also connected itself to the upstate library system, and they provide free movies, free books. And I also, if I can't get an access to a book that's in New York City because the waiting list is so long, I would just put myself on a waiting list in upstate region through Hoopla, and I would be able to get the latest books that just came out. And I mentioned, like, for example, the book To Sir with Love. I tried to read that book for the last 20 years, and I just couldn't get through it or get the same impact. Finally, it got released like 2 years ago or last year, and I went through it, and it had exactly what was missing from the movie, and I knew it was in there, just about his relationship and what it was like in England and things like that. So that book was finally released, and it was exciting. But I hope you can hear me. Let me just to reiterate that all of those books are free, and you can just get them all through your library card. You don't have to pay for them on Amazon or try to download them. And they normally have the best, the latest, and the most updated. So download the app on your phone, and then you can add your library card to it. The library card is free all through New York State, New York, and you can, even if when we were in Georgia, I used the same thing. I used the Overdrive and added my Georgia library card in there. Of course, Big Brother is always watching. They can keep a record of every book you read, but again, it's free. You go to the next slide. So some of the books that I wanted to mention that had a spiritual impact on me, and I'm gonna go fetch and tell you, I think I've read every single book you could imagine. If it was on audio, I listened to it. So one of the things about the audio book that you mentioned earlier is that when there's actors reading them, and like I kept hearing about The Invisible Man for like 30 years. I'm like, man, I got to read that book. That book, the writing and just the writer itself. He only wrote 2 books, that and Juneteenth, I think, before he died. But that book just explain things in such a way about paint and color. It's better to listen to it. But anyway, and you mentioned The Alchemist, and just the idea of every time I see a butterfly, I think about what the meaning of it is, and the interaction between the animals, and like, for example, in Mexico, when they created the city, Mexico City, the people went looking for this thing where there was like and I'm talking really fast, so I'm trying to keep it the time. They went looking for where the eagle was eating a snake, and that was the symbol for them to build this Mexico City. And Mexico City flourished. And just looking in the elements for answers, when I read the book The Alchemist, it connected that thought when I heard the story about how Mexico City was formed. And it also helps you to think beyond just looking in the environment for answers. Matter of fact, when Farrakhan was giving a speech recently to about the death of Nipsey Hussle, I heard him say, "Oh, I was driving here and I saw the sparrow fly across my car," and I said, "Oh, he thinks as far as the way he thinks is he's using the elements to understand the world." Things like that. So the mind just connects all these thoughts because I have all this information stored. Um, I went through high school and all these things, couldn't get through Frederick Douglass. And then finally I got a chance to read it. But it was better read when I'm older because now I understood how he escaped from slavery and how he had to think and why he thought differently. If I read that when I was younger, I didn't have the understanding so just because it's like listening to music, you hear a song one day, within 10, 20 years later, when you're in a relationship, you said, "Oh, now I know the meaning of that song." So those books need to be revisited. It wasn't just high school, like how he escaped, the mental process of how he escaped. And then I read a second and third book that he wrote about that he couldn't write at the time about the method he used to escape. But he said that he had to just turn around everything that white folks told him and think about it in the opposite. He went from seeing them as friends to seeing himself as a captive. And I was like, "Oh, that's what happens with your mind when you start." He said, I started to become paranoid. But if I read that as a kid, I couldn't understand it. So I'm like, why would you have kids reading this kind of book at 8th grade? So like I mentioned, reading these books later on kind of helps you with greater understanding. It helps you interpret it better. Now, just I mentioned that I read every Pulitzer Prize book that I can find because I want to know why it became a Pulitzer Prize or a bestseller. It's books like Secondhand Time, Kite Runner, things like that. You name it, I've gone through it. You know what I mean? I mentioned also why I wanted to know why Mark Twain was just such a good writer. And I listened to his book called Huckleberry Finn, and he knew how to play ebonics well, play on words, but most of he was like the best lyricist you could imagine. But one of the things that I admired is that he explained the Mississippi and he explained water. Now, somebody can write a book and explain how water feels. It's like that kid in Africa who can draw the image of water, and he can draw water. But Mark Twain can actually write water. And how do you write water and make you feel like if you're in the water with the waves and things like that? And that was him. So then I understood why he was great. I mentioned also books like Color of Water, like what did that mean? Because James McBride and a couple of other books. But two that I wanted to recommend was Man, Child, and the Promised Land, and which was a really good book. Just explained the transition from people coming up north from the south and leaving family behind and what that was like and trying to find a job in Chicago. And it's like you don't, these books captured a major part of history, 1970s, 1960s, 1950s. They're a good reference point. Even the book Iceberg Slim, it's what it was like, the amount of police killings, the brutality in the 1940s and 50s. These things, when I learn about it now, I have reference point. This isn't like, even I remember one day I was the name Nino Brown was in one of Robert Beck's Iceberg Slim book, but it was two characters he mentioned. One was Nino and one was another named Brown. And when the movie New Jack City came out, they put the two names together and gave it to Wesley Snipes. And all of a sudden, I'm like, this part of the puzzle was like, oh, that's where that name came from a book that Robert Beck, or was Iceberg Slim, wrote back in called White Folk. And I was like, oh, that's so. There's pieces of these puzzles that's listed all over the place that these people are borrowing information, just throwing it in there. And even the song "Lick You Like a Lollipop" by whatever this kid name is. What's that kid name that wrote that song that was seem popular? Help me out.
I don't remember. If anyone knows, I don't know.
The little kid, Lil Wayne, when he wrote that
Lil
song,
Wayne. Okay.
I found out that I realized that Buck 50 Productions and Lil Wayne, those Cash Money, they owned the rights to the Iceberg Slim and the Reader. And then that was one line that he took out of that book and made a song from it. And it became so popular. I said, man, these writers have gold mines. You just got to go into the stuff and they dissect the world for you. They take simple gestures and help make the world make sense, clarify it for you, make it so there's things that when I look at stuff, it's like when you buy a car and you're driving the car down the road and you notice that everybody else has the same car, but you didn't notice that before. Well, that's how these books work. It's like there's gestures or movement or behaviors that people do. And now when I look at them, I can see it because somebody interpreted it for me. And I'm like, oh, I thought I was the only one that had that understanding. So the world is like, for me, it's so different. Like I look at the rain differently. I look at the little bird that picks the worm. I remember Iceberg Slim explaining, well, Robert Beck is his real name. But either way, these books do something for your mind. It makes you see the world. It makes you interpret different, make you think about things differently. It feeds your soul. And one time I mentioned this, I gave this book to a friend and he said, man, that book was so dark. He said, it scared me, man. It made me think about women a certain way. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have introduced it to you. So it impacts the soul, in a certain way. So you definitely want to, when you talk about books and spirit, it has this impact on you that it becomes like these people become your friend. They talk through your mind. They walk you through ideas. When people don't even know when they're talking to you that you have all these reference points. I'm referencing 50, 60 different people. If you click to the next, so besides Pulitzer Prize books and favorite novels, I've gone through every white philosopher that you can name, every Andrew, and I want to know what Karl Marxist and Freud's interpretation of dreams, just to know what he was talking about. And it was all available on audio. And when you listen to it for the first time, you start to listen to the introduction, the history of Sigmund Freud, where he came from. Matter of fact, knowing that he had a dream about his father dying, that's where he started writing that book. It's like the background of these people, so they don't become this big mystery that they used to be in college and university. I just mentioned some famous Black authors, but one of the best books that I think that you guys should look at is this book called Status Anxiety by a guy named Alain Boutin. These guys, they speak my language because I've majored in sociology and all these classes of disciplines and psychology and things like that. When him and Malcolm Gladwell, when they write, they book have some kind of like a research background, which is what my college was about, the university I went to. But they also use social interaction and they use psychology. The language is so familiar that it helps you understand like circumstances better. So that's one of the recommendations is this writer. He's French. His name is Alain Boutin. But his book are just like Malcolm Gladwell's. And I've read all of Malcolm Gladwell's book from Blink to somehow I remember them when I need to, but Blink and you know the other three, David and Goliath, and the recent one he just let out where he explained the Sandra Bland case, but just how weak the FBI system was. And as a result, when a movie just came on about Cuba's breaking out the FBI state system and CIA, and it was on Netflix, I already knew that story because I knew Malcolm Gladwell just finished writing a book explaining that, So I mentioned to you about To Serve with Love, but understanding the difference between slavery in England and slavery in America. This guy, E. Bradwith, which was a Guyanese writer, was able to explain those things. He was so vivid. It kind of give you the comparison between what freedoms are in America and why it was different than England. And also all of Oprah's recommendations. So any book that she mentioned that end up hitting the bestsellers list, like Behold the Dreamers, that is one of the best books that you would ever read that explain what the American dream was. Now, the other day I ran into a guy, he said, I'm from Cameroon. I knew this guy. I knew his story. I knew what his favorite foods was. And I was able to relate to him in a matter of seconds. I said, oh, you eat papo, right? And he said, yeah. How did you know that? You live from this part of I forget what it was called, Cameroon. And I made the sound because the book kind of gave you the sound. But this book by this author about Behold the Dreamers, that was an excellent book. And if and you know those guys again, Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte. When you want to understand the civil rights movement and what it was like being in the room with Martin Luther King and being with Robert Kennedy and trying to sneak money and trying to get Sammy Davis to donate and not being able to swim in the same pool and being an actor and living on the top of a roof with Sidney Poitier was living on top of a roof on 115th Street in New York. You get the insight into their souls. They write this stuff out. One other book I want to mention is An American Marriage. This book was like excellent. I'm gonna stop here, man. I think I've gotten this a little overboard.
Finish your presentation.
All right, American Marriage, man. This book is like there's a book that will explain like where a person can. This book is so clever. It talks about. It actually explains what marriage is, what American marriage is. But a guy gets arrested and for raping a white woman, but he didn't really. I'm not gonna tell you the story. But this is one that Oprah recommended. But the story is told from 6 people's perspective, and you can it's like that famous story that everybody sees it, but it so it helps to understand how people see things and how they interpret things and where the misunderstandings can come. And it's like wow, you know. But there was this, you know, The Samurai or something is like that. But it was excellent writing, excellent. And what it does is it feeds you because it makes you understand how to think about a situation, how somebody can see something. But these people spend years, 14 years writing these books. They take so much time dissecting a word and putting in the right word. And I've watched all of Terry McMillan's, before she died, explain how she came up. She was writing her car. How she interpreted books. And just to get this information into your soul, man, it solves the puzzle for you. Like nobody can redirect your thoughts. If you flip to the next slide, but these are 4 books that you have to like listen to. You can't read them. You have to listen to them because you want to hear it in the accent. You want to hear the words because you don't want to interpret it for yourself. You want the author to read it to you. If you flip to the next one, I tried Michelle Obama's book. It was hard. She's just not, or whoever is just not a good writer. But I didn't get through the whole thing. But I'm going to go back to it. But these books are stuff that would have impacts on you. Can you flip to the next slide? Wait. Let me just see. I'm actually following my slide. But
I'm on the one with Karl Marx.
But the last one is. So if you go on if you go on this free website, they have all these lessons of like from people who wrote stuff. Like from college lectures, like The Wealth of Nations. Like, what is that? Like, what did him say? Or the philosophers, like, what did this philosopher say? Why does this mean? All this stuff is available. You just gotta like look for it. Like, what does communism mean and where it came from? But also those other books like you see on the other side about Mexico. Like before we went to these trips to all these countries, we knew the history of the country. We knew that where the Black people were in the pyramids and what the American. So this stuff, it's there. It's available to you. You don't go in blind, and they actually give you a more in-depth understanding that, and even the people that live there understand. You know, so you know what you're looking at when you interact with people. Do I have another slide? The last one, I think. I don't know if you have one more slide. If you could move to it, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but after that it's a Q&A. So it's the African.
That's it.
Okay.
No, the last slide was the one with the when you was talking about African religions a few days ago.
Right.
My mind went to these books. There's like 20 of these, and they're all written by Ben Kingsley, read by Ben Kingsley. And you know, Ben Kingsley did Gandhi. So when you're listening to him, he's dramatic. He's a Shakespearean, you know. I mentioned I put the book Wheat Belly out there because that book, as soon as I read it, I started losing weight. It explained the different wheat grains and what we were eating. And I said, oh, but it was so well written that I started like immediately. But then, so you can find all of the nutrition keto books that just came out free, you know, and I just pointed out a few other like the Buddhism, but that's all. I just wanted to tell you that I was inspired because I couldn't get the information the way I needed it when I was in college. So I went back and made sure that I listened to everything that I missed. But that's all. And hopefully the resources were helpful that I shared to you guys.
Excellent. Very much so. because I'm about to get all these free resources myself. So thank you for that. Let's
Thank you.
open up for Q&A. If anyone has any questions for any one of the people on the panel, let's see. All right, we have a bunch of questions here. Let's see. Um, okay, I see. Darrell says, I have The Alchemist now on my sofa reading. Great book, Raphael. Okay, excellent. Randall Fro, The Alchemist is one of my favorite, and so is The Four Agreements. Okay, so anyone have any questions for anyone on the panel or anything they would like to share regarding what they heard? As usual, if no one has anything, I have something. And if anyone wants to come after me, they can. My question, and I'm going to direct this to Randolph, because something you said about what your reading has done for you, which is kind of, it helps you to understand, and this is not verbatim, but it's almost like how I said it, where it's like it gives you these formulas for interacting with people. I think you mentioned that it was like you're there, like the person is speaking to you. And you could paraphrase it, or give me the exact quote. But my question is, do the information you give you those formulas? Just like how the scriptures give formulas, are you getting formulas on how to deal with people, how to deal with scenarios, and do you actually implement those scenarios in your own life? I know you mentioned with the wheat belly, but some of the other wisdom, do you use the information to navigate your life as if those people are present with you, in the book?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That was a good question. And I actually was thinking about the person that spoke before, Alexandria, and just taking things and being more practical. I like the fact that a woman, my wife, also can just look at a book, read it, and then go and make something or build it. And so the book like that you can just apply the knowledge right away. I thought maybe I was just being a little too academic in my learning, and I needed to be able to just make physical things. So I'm impressed with people that can read something and then do it, read a manual and press play, and on and play and use the remote.
Hmm.
Well, for me, when you say implement it, when I'm interacting with people, I know so much about them, their gestures, their move, their thoughts. Even I read a second or third book called Adultery by Pablo Coelho. He just wrote it about a woman in Switzerland, and he explained the desire of this woman, and it just helped me to understand like what I'm dealing with. What the thinking is. It was the last book Pablo Coelho wrote called Adultery. If you want to look that one up,
Okay.
but yes, it you don't see it, but the world, like I said to you, it's like the car that's driving past. The world makes sense to me, and every part, the information that comes in, it has a place where it fits. So I'm not walking around dark. It's like a light bulb went off. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I don't know. It doesn't give me back money. It doesn't. There's no physical manifestation of it. But for me, I'm
I lost the last part of what you were saying. You said for me, and then you.
for me, I'm free, when I talk to people, I can connect to them in ways.
Yeah, you're going in and out. The last part we heard was connect, but I think what you're.
Connect with people a certain way. You can, when, like you mentioned, you like say their name a certain way, and they're
Mhm.
like, all of a sudden they're willing to give over, like, oh, you know me, you understand me. Yep.
Mhm.
When I say to a Mexican person, oh, you're from you eat mele, or you eat this kind of thing, they say, yeah, yeah, yeah. How did you know that? Instead of seeing them as just Mexican across the border, that you eat, what they eat, you pronounce it awaka. You can connect with these people a little bit different, and that's just, it helps. You know what I mean?
And thank you for that. I read many years ago, Think and Grow Rich, but this one was a spin-off of the original one. This was written by Dennis Kimbro, and I think I read that when I was 17 or 19, one of those ages. And in the book, he was talking about Roosevelt, and he said Roosevelt, um, was such a reader that he always knew, just like how you're mentioning, how to connect with people, by knowing a little bit of something about everything and being
Yeah.
interested in it. And that is a means of building great relationships. And, people take their guard down because you're connected with them. So I think that's
Yep.
the same kind of thing that you're mentioning there.
Yeah.
I have a second follow-up question for you. Do you, the same question like I asked Rafaela with being a fish in water by doing all these different things, do you feel any kind of bottlenecking with all of the information that you're able to read? Do you feel a sense of bottlenecking because you're reading too much? Or do you feel like, nah, this is my thing. I'm a fish in water. I am doing what it is that I do, and it's not necessary for me to have an output. This is just my water. I'm swimming in information.
Well, the thing is, for me personally, is what it does is I choose what I want to learn. You know what I mean? And um, it's not it's not being bombarded like a TV show. You know, and that's what's cool about this thing. It's like I can so the information like it's like I'm shaping my own mind and my thoughts and like I have never gotten into Stephen King's book and people or the other mysteries and stuff like that even though it might be good writing but with this I'm choosing how to spend my information. I don't feel like trapped with a bunch of information. I actually it liberates me from seeing patterns and things like that. It makes me make sense of a confusing world, you know.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to open it up for anyone else. Alexandra, did you have a comment?
Yes. While Randolph was talking, I was thinking about how, everyone, and especially children, their language processing is different. So having audiobooks and actual books to read is a very good thing to do. You need to have both. Because I know personally, and I remember a couple of years ago, you recommended Alexander Scorby for the Bible readings.
Right.
Reading the Bible and the words, it's so different when you actually hear it, and with Alexander Scorby, his tone, it just breaks it down and it makes this visual picture in your mind that the understanding comes to you so differently, like you can see it. And audiobooks does that. So I think having, both in your repertoire is really good, and especially for children.
Mm-hmm. I
That's
agree.
what I wanted to say.
And even the visual aspect of it, is there a way of taking these books? I know they do it with movies, but is there a way of capturing these books in the form of art, like the point, just one piece of art, just like how I don't know if it was Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, but when they painted that painting for the Medici family, yeah, it was like
Mhm.
that image told a whole story, the creation. Even though it was the wrong, cast of people, it told a story. So is there a way of being able to do that for the other the visual learners? Those are things we have to explore. I know Rafaela with her art, she's able to do that and tell a story with her art. And that may be it. But being able to make it so that people are edified.
I just want to add one other thing about that.
Yep.
Sometimes if you look at something and there's a thing when you read the book yourself, you're owning it because it's you're hearing it in your voice, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there's also when you watch a piece of art, you don't understand how to interpret it unless you have that person just talking you through what you're seeing. So there's people that look at art and they say, I know this is nice, but it's like, what is it that I'm looking at? Why is it so good?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the reader or the person or the author or the interpreter can actually help you make sense of that information. A lot of people, um, they don't have that. They say, I got this thing. I know it's nice. Why is it nice? You know. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so you definitely need both, like Alexandria mentioned, and you know, to one way you can own it, the other one where it can impact you.
That takes me to another and I think Rafaela, you had a point. So I'm gonna let you go and then I'll come after.
I was going to say a couple of things. One, there are now a few books that some artists are actually drawing some of the points of the book.
Oh, they stole my idea. You see that?
So you know how they used to have cliff notes?
Yeah.
So now they're doing kind of a sort of a cliff note idea, but it's through drawing. So people that might want to learn about a book, they would do like a 14-minute drawing of the book in video so people can actually see and, oh, that's what the book is about. So I found some of those on YouTube. And then I was going to add to Randolph in terms of art. The cool thing about art and about reading, right, is that when you read and you're engrossed in that story and you become part of the whole connection with the story. What's cool about art is that when you look at art, even though the intent of the artist might have been one thing, and I think this is where people that read a lot get to now create their own story. So when you look at art, you can say, it's here, so it's a great art, but I don't get what they're trying to do. Create what it is that you think you're seeing. And I think it goes into a whole amazing world of discovery for yourself as well. So and when I look at art, and that's how sometimes I don't know what this means, but I create what I think I want it to mean. So
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good point. Let me say this, and either one of you guys could chime in before we wrap up. When we did that presentation the other day about writing your own script, Jose mentioned that Tupac, when he did that role of Bishop in Juice, that he became that character, and that's what changed Tupac into who we know Tupac to be now, in the silver screen or in the street. Do you believe, and anyone could answer this, that by the books that you're reading, you're becoming a combination of these various characters, whether it's scripture or as Randolph is reading so many books, are you morphing into the combination of all of the various people that you have read? Are you becoming that?
I want to answer some of that for you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
They say that, like, when I listened to Terry McMillan, and she said, "What you start writing this character, and then the character starts speaking for itself. All of a sudden, the character takes over and says, no, that's not what I was going to say. I would have said this." And it's like, oh, okay. So, I have a little bit of a different view on Tupac. I think that when people wanted him to be that, and that when they came to him, they were looking for that, and then he performed that form in real life. And more than like he was trying to be that, and more that you have all of these sides to you, and some of it gets fed. You know what I mean? So was he becoming his best self of what he wanted to be? You know what I mean? So I don't know necessarily like I'm morphing into these people. I think that when I'm faced with a situation, I can channel all of them to figure which one I want to answer this question for me or address the situation. You know what I mean?
So is it more like it's revealing who you are, but this is the reading is giving you the tools? Is it this is who you are, but this is who you are magnified now with this additional information?
Right. That's a good question. It's the same question that what's his name asked. Is it nature or nurture?
Right.
And that's the seed of education. There's two books that explains that. I forget the two guys' name, but that was the argument that when you're getting the information, is it bringing out what's inside of you, or is it the other way around, where something is coming in you? And and like I said, I think people have all these different sides, and some of it feeds the other one. That's why I said it's important to choose what you're putting in. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. And that's the nature of this whole conversation. It's food, and what food are you eating, and what results. And it could be a script, it could be a movie, it could be a song, it could be a reading. But whatever you feed, input and output, you're gonna get out what you put in.
Yeah.
All right. Rafaela, anything that I thought you unmuted. Did you have something to say?
yeah, I was right off was saying, I think what stories and books do is, I think it does reveal certain things about you, but it also influences, so maybe a character that might live out a certain way, and you're like, you know what, this is a great way to live or a great way to be. So I think it can influence your personality as well, and how you carry things out. So I think it has both. It can influence, but it also reveals, I think, some parts of who you are.
Excellent. I mean, for me, when I read, there's no, I don't care what it is. Anything that I read or see or hear, it's something happens to it. It's like it goes in and then it the spirit hit it, and then it becomes something totally increased. For example, the fella song, the Fear No Man, just the beginning part of what he said. Now, mind you, we're talking about fasting in on Facebook. We're talking about fasting to eliminate fear, to address fear. But there was something about the way he made that quote from Kwame Nkrumah that said the key to life is to be without fear. And I guess the combination of words that he used, the key, it just seemed to stand out more that that's how you overcome anything, is to be fearless. And for whatever reason, that created a shift. And that was just what, one paragraph. So when information comes in, something happens, and it magnifies. I guess when the spirit hit, it magnifies and becomes even greater than what was already presented. So that's my last 2 cents. Anyone else? Any questions, comments? Well, I wanted to thank our guest, Randolph, for bringing out such great information and resources. Um, Likewise, Alexandra, for sharing your resources and your process. Same for Rafaela for also doing the same. Um, I think this was a great presentation. Hopefully, the resources can be explored, and everyone can, take their life to another level. It just seems so unlimited. And I know for those of us who have this kind of access, for example, you'll go to places like, I mean, Randolph knows, and maybe some of you have traveled, or even maybe Rafaela know from Brazil, but you go to some libraries in some countries and you cannot remove um, a lot of the books, and the resources and the access is limited. Maybe now there's more access, but the level of access that we have now, even something that's like Randolph mentioned, having a library card, someone from abroad may want that library card, but because they don't have that, they don't have that level of access. So the amount of access that we have, we should really be taking a greater advantage of all of it. And one thing we didn't mention, even a lot of the online colleges. I know Alex mentioned some state resources, but there are whole full-blown schools that you could go and get certain certificates online. So we have a lot of food that we can eat in the form of information. And then there's also a lot of bones and poison that you could eat too. So choose wisely. Again, remember to tell everyone about 30-day redemption. We're coming to the last day tomorrow, but the information will be available on our landing page. Right now, today would be at 59 videos of content to inspire. So please share the project with everyone, let them know what we're doing, and they can support what we do. So thank you all. Again, have a wonderful day, and we will pick up tomorrow for our final 30-day redemption show.